Hello Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We are a channel all about tabletop gaming, and today we're going to continue our series of the Pathfinder Second Edition classes with the Psychic. The Psychic is a spellcaster from the Dark Archives, and it launched along with the Thaumaturge. As always, let's start with stats and progression. The Psychic gets 6 plus Constitution modifier, HP per level, and their key ability is either Intelligence or Charisma. This is actually our first caster who gets an option for their key casting ability. Before, we've seen it with Marshals, but this is our first caster. For Perception, the Psychic begins Trained and progresses to Expert at 11th level. For Saving Throws, the Psychic begins Trained in Fortitude, and that progresses to Expert at 9. They begin Trained in Reflex, and that progresses to Expert at 5. And they begin Expert in Will, which progresses to Master at 11, and Legendary at 17. For skills, they are proficient with Occultism and 3 plus their Intelligence mod additional skills. For attacks, they are trained in Simple and Unarmed Attacks, which progresses to Expert at 11, and they do pick up Weapon Specialization at 13. And for defense, they begin Trained in Unarmored Defense, and that progresses to Expert at 13 as well. As spellcasters, they begin Trained in Occult Spontaneous Spell Casting, and that progresses to Expert at 7, Master at 15, and Legendary at 19. For their class features, they get Spellcasting, obviously, while Psychics are full 10th level spellcasters with Legendary Proficiency in Pathfinder Second Edition. They do get the fewest spell slots among full casters, maxing at 2 per level versus the normal 3 times per level, or 3 spells per level, or even the 4 of a wizard or a sorcerer, which puts them at about half the spells per day of a wizard or sorcerer, with the variance being that no classes get more than 1 10th level spell without taking a feat. But essentially, yeah, very few spell slots, certainly behind anything that isn't a wave caster or the bound spellcasters like the Magus and the Summoner. But Psychics are less reliant on their spell slots than other classes, and we'll get to that in a moment. Additionally, like other spellcasters, the Psychic has a spell repertoire, or spontaneous casters, I should specify. They have a spell repertoire, and they must learn higher versions of spells individually if they want to heighten, except for their signature spells, which they start selecting at 3rd level once they get access to 2nd level spells. So again, just like any other spontaneous caster, just a lot fewer spells. We'll put up their chart here, and you can see they even get fewer cantrips, but also they don't, and we'll get to that. Part of that thing I keep saying we're going to get to is Unleash Psyche. So as a free action, it's an ability that you can use so long as you're in combat and your last you cast a spell on your previous turn, you can tap into the depths of your mind and let the power flood through. For 2 rounds, your psychic power manifests visually around you, and you can use Psyche special abilities like that you get from your subconscious mind. Most impressively, you will, while your Psyche is unleashed, your damaging spells gain a status bonus equal to double the spell's level, including your cantrips. After 2 rounds, it ends, you become Stupefied 1, and, normal sort of cooldown stuff occurs. This is sort of the unique aspect of the Psychic, in addition to the amps, which, we will get to, where you sort of have this, almost like this barbarian rage as a spellcaster. You heard me mention Subconscious Mind. That's one of the 2 options that you have, the 2 toggles you have when creating your Psychic that create your sort of custom subclass. At level 1, your first major choice as a Psychic is your unconscious or your subconscious mind. This is the innate way, an approach you have to accessing your psychic abilities and your spells. This also determines if you're using Intelligence or Charisma as your key casting stat. Each option grants a unique single-action Psyche ability that you can use only while your Psyche is unleashed, and also allows you to replace the verbal component of a spell with a different alternative component that change how your spells manifest, which is a nice RP component. While these do allow you to not have to speak to use your spells, the replacement components do still require concentration. You're still going to be probably provoking in 99% of the same cases, but it's still a nice little thing that you can lean into and set your spells apart from other casters in the party. Your charisma options include Emotional Acceptance. The granted ability is to heal or bolster an ally against mental effects, and your thought components are emotions. Wandering Reverie is the other charisma-based option. Its granted ability allows you to conceal yourself by fading in or out of the world or letting your imagination manifest in other distracting ways. Your thought component is imagination so vivid that others catch glimpses of it. And on the flip side, we have the intelligence options. The first one is gathered lore. Your granted action lets you count as having prepared to aid all allies within 30 feet, rolling occultism to do so as you tap into the lessons of your study, regardless of what the appropriate aid action might have been. And your thought components are silent mantras or projected runes. Finally, for intelligence, we have the precise discipline. The granted ability gives you a bonus to your AC and reflex saves, and your thought components are complex calculations which may manifest as patterns of light or geometric symbols or even harmonic tones. So that's your subconscious mind. Now we have your conscious mind. You also select this at first level, and what it does is it does a lot to determine your playstyle and your role. In addition to providing granted spells to your repertoire that are thematic to your chosen conscious mind, it's also going to determine your Psi-Cantrips and their amps. So in addition to your 3 normal cantrips, you start with 3 special called Psi-Cantrips. 2 of these are enhanced versions of existing cantrips available to any occult caster, and the third is a wholly unique cantrip only accessible to psychics. All these Psi-Cantrips can be amped by expending one of your 2 starting focus points, which further enhances these cantrips' effects, generally making them roughly on par with the power of a slotted spell. These do a great job of providing a classic psychic archetype from fiction. As I said, it's really going to determine your playstyle, and more than that, they are going to help you to sort of bypass or overcome those few spell slots that you have. The conscious minds we have available are the Distant Grasp, which is themed around telekinesis, the Infinite Eye, which is themed around precognition and remote viewing, the Oscillating Wave, which is themed around the balance of the conservation of energy using heat and cold in equal measure, the Silent Whisper, which is themed around reading and controlling minds, the Tangible Dream, which is themed around creating both illusions and solid thought forms, and the Unbound Step, which is themed around teleportation. Level up features are few and far between as casters. We sort of expect that since the bulk of their class abilities are coming from spells, and in the Psychic's case, they're Psi-Cantrips and amps. But at 5th level, you get Clarity of Focus to gain another focus point, meeting the maximum of 3 that Pathfinder Second Edition allows. At 6th level, you get a deeper Psi-Cantrip, where you gain a new and more powerful Psi-Cantrip that you can use in addition to the ones you already have. And at 10th level, you gain your deepest Psi-Cantrip, gaining the most powerful Psi-Cantrip of your conscious mind. Next, let's talk Feats and Builds. Thanks to its 2-part subclass system of conscious and subconscious mind, like the wizard, the psychic has a lot of customization potential. In addition to classics like the Cantrip expansion and Psi-Strike, which is a psychic version of the Sorcerer's Bespelled Weapon, you gain a second 10th level. You can also gain a second 10th level slot like most casters. You can get more signature spells like the Sorcerer can, and you get the ability to recover more than 1 focus point when you refocus, which seems like a must for this class. And again, is a very common thing that a lot of casters get. But in addition to that, there's also a lot of thematic and unique options, and many of these feats benefit from or otherwise interact with your Unleashed Psyche and amps. There are lots of feats that make you resistant or resilient to mental damage, which increases while unleashed. There are counter spells specifically for mental effects, or even ability to provide bonus to social skills based on the spells that you've recently cast affecting minds. Thought form summoning alters summon creatures to be intangible, like tulpas, passing through enemy creatures and resisting physical damage, but becoming weak to mental and force damage, which are all really fun thematic tools. If you're worried about running out of focus points, Strain Mind will allow you to deal damage to yourself to amp a cantrip when you're out of focus points, or you can go full Mind Flayer with Brain Drain, a Psyche 2 action ability. So that Psyche trait means you can only do it while your Psyche's unleashed, but it's a 2-action ability to stupefy a target and regain a focus point by feeding on their psychic energy, which is very, very cool. Speaking of Unleashed Psyche, you can add to the extreme nature of that with Dark Persona's Presence, which creates a 30-foot aura of terror, or Violent Unleash, which emanates a small AoE whenever you unleash your Psyche. Be aware that will hit your allies, but it's still very cool. Additionally, there are alternative amps that you can use that will apply to spells that meet the criteria, like Remove Presence, which makes you undetected to one of the creatures who fail their saves or are hit by your psychic attack spells. or Warp Space, which lets you choose an alternate origin point for your Psi-Cantrip to bypass enemy cover or extend your reach. There are also a set of unique 10th level feats particular to your subconscious mind to enhance that flavor with cool abilities. And what's really nice is as a psychic, you get a lot of cool reactions, like dealing mental damage to creatures who target you with mental spells when you critically succeed the save, the ability to unleash your psyche as a reaction to seeing an ally drop unconscious, the ability to replace a reflex or fort save with a will save. Considering casters usually don't get a lot of reactions, and especially, not until higher levels, oftentimes if they do, it's very cool to see the psychic get those and how it sort of affects the feel of the class. Like, that sort of, while they lack a higher perception modifier, which you might expect from something like a psychic, or maybe not, but I sort of did, but what they make up for that by having these reactions to make them feel like, even though their perception isn't any higher, they are still a little bit more aware of their surroundings because of it. At the highest levels, you can constantly levitate, you can cast spells of 5th level or lower without expending spell slots, which is very good, or you can become a being of pure thought, altering your appearance, resisting physical damage, and even returning to life when slain by reconstructing yourself from the memories of another creature. If you don't think that's awesome, I don't know what to tell you. That is a really cool ability. And it's interesting because we've seen a lot of in Book of the Dead, we saw a lot of the undead archetypes had these sort of limited use, get out of jail, get out of death free cards. We haven't seen that a lot from the core classes until this one. And I think it's a really thematic, cool, fun ability. Speaking of really cool and thematic, my personal favorite is Cranial Detonation, which lets you explode the head of an enemy slain by one of your spells, which damages nearby creatures, and if those creatures die, their heads explode, which can continue a train of exploding heads. It's wild, it's delicious, I love it. No one creature can be subject to the damage more than once, but it's still a nice way to just potentially nuke an entire town if you really wanted to. Psychic's wild. So, what do I think? The Psychic is a powerful blaster, the likes of which I didn't really expect to see in 2e, at least not in this form, certainly an Occult caster. Its massive damage bonus while unleashed and the problems that come afterwards, like the magical version of Barbarian's Rage, it's a very interesting concept. The wide ranges of subclasses and pretty universally awesome Psi-Cantrips means you're getting a lot in exchange for those reduced spell slots. Tesseract Tunnel from the Unbound Steppe, for example, is just incredible for mobility, both for yourself and a team. And the fact that these are renewable resources throughout the day means that Psychic is filling that 5e Warlock role of a caster that never really runs on empty, despite its reduced slots. So it's hitting a niche that a lot of people are asking for. Is it going to necessarily fit the theme of a fiendish type of a warlock or something like that? No, but if you like the idea of an aberration, a Cthulhu warlock, this is definitely going to hit that. In fact, I've got a player sort of playing a makeshift Mind Flayer type character in an Abomination Vaults game, and he is very much going to be switching to the Psychic from a sorcerer. I also really love that you get to choose between int and charisma, as it broadens the character concepts, and the baked-in psychic flavor on even standard abilities is tremendous. When your unarmored defense or fortitude saves increase, for example, they are described as construct force barriers and mind over matter, respectively. While most classes have these flavor notes here and there, Psychic drives them home on almost every standard proficiency increase, which is great not just for the flavor, but also for explaining mechanically how you have this character who, may be completely just floating in space with no armor or protections and is still not getting hit. They're still as squishy as any other caster, but it's just a fun flavor. The only real complaints I have for the Psychic is that I wish there was a Wiz-based version. We don't have a lot of Wisdom-based classes in general, just the Druid and the Cleric and the core rulebook, and nothing since, despite almost doubling our number of classes. Maybe we did total. And I'd like to see more Wiz-based stuff. But Paizo creator Luis Loza, who works on Lost Omens line primarily, I'm sure he dabbles elsewhere and consults, but that's sort of his thing. He did release this exact thing for a Pathfinder Infinite release that you can get for a couple of bucks over there. We'll put a link down in the description. The only other thing I'd say is I have to admit the Psychic Dedication, granting a Psi-Cantrip and an amp, seems a bit strong compared to other multi-class dedications. I don't think Psychic is too strong as a class, although it does a lot of really cool things that nothing else can really approach right now. Nor do I think the Psychic archetype overall is too strong. But as a single dip feat, that dedication and getting one of those amped Psi-Cantrips is very strong. And I think that it's one of the best in the game right now. And just given how many great options there are for what you pick up with that, probably whatever your build is, you're going to be able to find an ampable cantrip from the Psychic that you're going to want to poach. And so I don't really know what the fix would have been there. They've got to provide the focus point and all that. I think maybe for me, I would have liked to have seen what they typically do with classes that have this big unique feature and make it tied to a level 4 feat, not just the dedication. But, with the limited number of spell slots, I get why they did it. I just think it's a little strong. And again, this does not mean that the class overall is strong or anything like that. I mean, it's strong, but I mean not broken or anything. Just that one initial feat from the dedication is getting you a lot of value. All in all, I'm a big fan of the Psychic, and I wouldn't mind seeing this new caster chassis applied to the other traditions. Blaster casters are something that repeatedly over and over the community has said doesn't work in Pathfinder Second Edition, and for the most part, that's not exactly false. But we have seen with Secrets of Magic and the Shadow Signet and other things that have released since the core rulebook came out, and they saw the feedback of that. We have seen Paizo doing more and more to give new options to this sort of build. I don't think we're necessarily there yet. I do wonder about seeing things like how we got the Book of the Dead. We got a Necromancer archetype that was just leaning into that flavor of spellcaster. I wonder if we might see something like a blaster caster, an illusionist even, and just things like that are sort of like these fighting style feats that we got for martials, like dual weapon warrior and archer and mauler and things like that, but maybe for casters to let you lean into a play style with your caster, which is something that by default casters don't really allow you to do for the most part. But that's really just conjecture, and this class by itself is great, even if they don't continue the chassis. I'm very glad to see it. And you can homebrew it easily. If you've watched our channel a lot, you know that I've gone through a journey giving my player a kineticist for Second Edition before they announced theirs. And this is the chassis that I'm using. I just turned it into a primal. That is honestly a little bit scary. The Psychic works with its damage boosts with Unleash Psyche because there's so few big, hard-hitting occult damage spells. So getting that damage boost is honestly a lot of times just going to get them similar to what an occult or primal caster could do, just based on how much more damaging those spells tend to be in the primal and occult and arcane traditions. And so it's definitely, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you just port that over no change. I'm doing it. He paid his dues with the terrible playtest Psychic and all that. So he can keep it until it becomes an obvious problem. We allow a little homebrew anyway, and I don't think any of my party's minding yet. But if you plan to do it, just take that into account. But that's what I think. What do you think? Have you played the Psychic or GM'd for one? What's your favorite subclass combo? Are you having fun with the unique flavor of this class? Because I know that in my other game we are. So thanks so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Welcome to the Collective. We'll see you next time. Bye.